Are you a liberal? Do you support the welfare system? If you answered yes to both of these questions, then I have a story for you. Myself personally, I've stated previously in the podcast that over the last couple years I've really gotten away from supporting the welfare system. I thought it was a good system to give those that needed help the means to survive, and without a doubt there are those that genuinely do need assistance from the welfare. This can include disability checks. There are plenty of people out there that just can't work because they physically cannot. They are restricted to a wheelchair or whatever. Sure, there are certain jobs they can do, but others cannot. What if you're a quadriplegic? So something like disability still makes sense to me to this day. But as for welfare of its own, I personally see this as a crutch for society. See, when I was younger, I actually had a friend who I met. He was a few years older. This is going back to when I was in high school. He was a friend that I knew because I used to work at the time I worked at Tim Hortons. And Tim Hortons, there you probably see them around if you live in Canada. Many of them are attached to a Wendy's. For a short period of time, he worked at the Wendy's, so I got to know him through there because we were close with each other's staff. We had arrangements such as we give them donuts, they give us burgers, coffees for Frosties. It was a great deal. Anyway, so he did not work there very long, but I kind of met him a few times. Then a few months later, he just showed up outside of my high school, and I ran into him. This is because he knew one or two other students that went to the school. They were neighbors of his, this is why. So when I met him, he was 20. And I was 16, I believe. So we chilled once or twice, got to know each other. And I would say personally, I let a lot go with him. He was a dirty guy. He didn't look great. His teeth were bad. His house was shit. But I tried to look all past that and be his friend. And I could for a while. But one thing is important to state is from the time I knew him to the time I stopped being friends with him, he was on welfare. And that was about a good 2 or 3 years. I think 2 years, closer to 2. So what had happened is he had actually dropped out of school when he was 17. And he immediately went on student welfare. Well, 3 years down the road, he was still enrolled in student welfare. He had barely had any jobs, and again, any job he did have lasted for maybe a few weeks. When he worked at Wendy's, I don't even think he passed the 3-month probation there before he was gone. So every month with him was the same. The beginning of the month would come, he'd get that welfare check, he'd pay off his rent, which a good chunk of it would go to. Of course, he needs a roof over his head. And then he would blow the last few $100s on a little bit of groceries, mostly smokes and booze and weed. And I'm not going to judge anybody too much for spending money on smokes or booze or weed, but if that's all you're spending on, those bills were the majority of the rest of his money. He spent much less on groceries per month than he spent on booze, weed, and smokes. So he's always out of money, usually before the first week was up. He spent the rest of the time mooching off everybody else. I met a few friends through him, and these were people that went to my high school. These guys were about my age, either my age or a year younger than me. So between the three of us, he used to mooch food, cigarettes, weed, whatever else. He just would mooch everything off everyone. He would wait till the next month showed up, get his welfare check again. This went on for some time, and it started pissing us all off. So we sat him down one day, and we told him, it's like, listen, dude, you get about $800, $900 a month from welfare. If you worked a full-time job, you already complain about how, your life sucks and you have nothing to do. So go work a full-time job. You have the time. And you will bring in about $900 roughly every 2 weeks. You will pretty much almost double the amount of money you're bringing into your house if you just work a job. Just do it. Your conditions will improve. You'll be able to feed yourself. You'll be able to afford cigarettes, which he smoked a lot of cigarettes. Like, this was easily a pack a day guy or more. Or whatever else you wanted. And you wouldn't have to worry. You would be well off. You have your roommates paying the other half of the rent. So, you'll be fine. And even though he sat there and was like, yeah, never did it. Not once did he ever really go out and get a job. I think he had one job in the 2 years that I was friends with him. And that was about maybe at most 2 weeks. And you always complain about how it's bullshit. Well, when you don't have a job, really no job is above you. Because you need something to survive, and you cannot rely on the system. Now, at first I tried genuinely being his friend. Within a while, he was really just the guy who bought me cigarettes. I wasn't old enough, I didn't have an ID, I needed somebody who could buy me cigarettes. This was the guy. So eventually I got sick and tired, and I stopped seeing him. This is when I started changing my opinion about welfare, because I was aware that while he was on welfare, this entire time he was supposed to be sending away to his worker about how he was looking for jobs. You know, he had to give information on businesses that he had applied to during his time on welfare. He had to do this, I think, every 3 months. So every time he had to send it in, he would just say that he was looking for jobs, had no luck. And they would extend his welfare over and over and over again. I mean, this guy, as far as I know, to this day, as far as I know, he's still on welfare. But when I calculated it, by the time I stopped being friends with him, he was 22. He had been on welfare since he was 17, and that is supposed to be student welfare, which gave you more. That was 5 years he had been on student welfare. How is that even possible? Unless you're, like, a poor-ass dude going out to be, like, a goddamn doctor or something, you've taken out a bunch of loans, and now you're on welfare because that's all you have to survive while you put you through school. I do not understand how you can be on a student welfare for 5 years. And nothing ever happened. He never got audited. Nobody ever threatened to cut him off of his welfare. How could this continue? Surely by now the people, his caseworkers, should know that he was bullshitting the system. But nothing ever happened. So I saw that we needed to reform the welfare system. I've changed my opinion on that, definitely. More and more, I would say over the last year, I am just completely against it, because I've come to just see that those who are willing to live on the bare minimum, if they don't have to work, will take welfare. And they'll just live off the tax money of everybody else. Now, I didn't just bring this up for no reason. I didn't just come out here to bash this guy that I used to be friends with. The reason I brought this up and I tell you this story is because I came across an article the other day which says, Ottawa sees surge in welfare fraud as province eases eligibility rules. City on track to double annual average of Ontario Works fraud cases. Now, Ontario Works is a social assistance program, and this offers you assistance in a couple different ways. Of course, as always, it offers you financial assistance. It also offers you benefits and insurance if you cannot afford it. You know, if you have fire, flood, there's theft coverages. So this is Ontario's welfare system. I think one of the problems is with this, honestly, is they've made it too easy for people to apply for it. Because you can apply for it 24/7 in French and English, which, of course, French and English in Canada, but you can access it from any computer as long as you have an internet connection. You just fill out the forms, and off you go. I think this is a big problem if it's that easy to file for welfare that you can just do it while watching an episode of Family Guy in the background. So yeah, the main point of this program is offer financial assistance for you, also employment assistance. So they got workshops for resume writings, job counseling, access to education. And you don't really seem to need much in order to be eligible for this. You just need to live in Ontario, be in financial need, which is your household doesn't have sufficient financial resources to meet basic living expenses. Be willing to make reasonable efforts to find, prepare for, and keep a job unless you have specific circumstances that temporarily prevent you from doing so, such as an illness or caregiving responsibilities. I personally find these are actually understandable if you have an illness or, you have to sometimes look after members of your family. So this is something that I won't really rage against. But what the difference was, what they did to ease these restrictions is they've dropped the amount that to apply for. In your bank account before, you needed to have less than $2,500 in order to apply for this welfare. Well, now they've made it that you have to have less than $10,000 inside your bank account. I have less than $10,000 now. I wouldn't apply for welfare. Hell, I have less than $2,500 right now in my bank account. I wouldn't apply for welfare. And going through school right now, I actually had to quit my job for it because the hours couldn't accommodate. But if I was in real financial need, I would just go find a job where the hours are more flexible. I wouldn't go on welfare over this. I admit I'm taking out loans for this, but those I have to pay back. So now, $10,000 in your account is nothing to sneeze at, but they're saying that that's not even enough to financially support your basic living expenses. Are you fucking kidding me? That's a down payment on a house. So anyway, what this article from the CBC goes on to say is the City of Ottawa is dealing with an unusually high number of welfare fraud cases this year, and it is feared new eligibility requirements for Ontario workers could add to the problem. The city, which administers the provincial welfare program, has cut benefits to 260 clients due to fraud so far in 2017, putting it on track for the highest number of fraud cases since 2013, or double the annual average. Now, 260 doesn't seem like it's that many, really, when you look at there's about 1 million people in Ottawa. But how many welfare fraud cases do we hear about? And I told you about a very obvious one at the beginning of this episode that didn't get checked at all. And there's plenty of forums. There's Reddit, which talks about these things. So you can go on and see how many people actually get away with it. You can report it. But even plenty of cases that get reported, just nothing seems to be done. The rise can be at least partly explained by the steady increase in the number of Ontario Works recipients. More than 500,000 people receive the income-supported benefits each month, and more than 37,000 of those are in Ottawa. Quote, it's corresponded to the caseload increase, said Micheline McTiernan, a director for the city's Community and Social Service Program. However, instances of fraud are currently rising at a faster rate than the number of Ontario Works cases, and the surge shows no sign of slowing. This is one of those slippery slope moments. You open the floodgates and everyone's going to come rushing through. I mean, a drop of this amount, from $2,500 to $10,000, we've quadrupled the eligibility. Literally quadruple the amount of people could apply for this. And they may not even need it, but they're going to apply for it. It's like, oh, free money from the government. At the same time, Ontario has eased welfare eligibility requirements, allowing thousands more to apply for benefits. Advocates say it's a welcome change. Quote, the people who need these benefits are often people who have more than $1,000 in the bank, said Gary Stein, Executive Director of the South Ottawa Community Legal Services, which offers benefit advice to clients. Quote, it's a good thing. But as the number of recipients increases, so could the number of fraud cases. You think? Of course it's going to raise the number of fraud cases. If you relax the rules and make it this easy, people are going to take advantage. People always take advantage. I don't know whether the Ontario Liberals just seem to have a rose-colored glasses on when they're looking at humanity. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not a pessimist about humans. I don't think humans are scum or anything like that, but we're obviously not angels, so we should be prepared for the obvious, like people trying to take advantage of free money. Moving on. Complicated rules, random audits. Welfare amounts vary. A single person receives about $700 a month, while a family of 5 could be eligible for about $2,200. Every dollar a recipient earns over $200 per month reduces their benefits by 50 cents, so someone working with a low-paying job could quickly have their assistance slashed by half. Quote, the benefit programs are complicated. They're hard for people to understand the rules. Governments try to make the rules clearer, but there are still rules that are hard for people to often understand, end quote, Stein said. Instances of fraud discovered during random audits to which recipients consent when they apply for Ontario work benefits. Instances of fraud are discovered during random audits to which recipients consent when they apply for Ontario Works Benefit. If a recipient's financial situation has changed and they failed to disclose it, it could mean trouble. Quote, if the City of Ottawa and the Government of Ontario thinks that the person purposely withheld information, that runs a risk of leading to criminal fraud charges, Stein said. I really think for the most part, the problem is that people don't disclose informations of changes that are made, that people apply when they actually do legitimately need welfare, when they're between jobs or something, but then they start working and then they don't get off the welfare. Or they could go looking for another job, like this story of the guy I told you beforehand, and then just don't ever really go back. Some bullshit injuries. This one wasn't a welfare fraud, like against the government, but technically it is an insurance fraud. A guy I used to work with talked about when they were doing mass layoffs at one of his old companies. Shit, you know what? It might have even been Nortel, because I know he used to work there. They were doing mass layoffs at one of this old company that they used to work at. And on their way out after being fired, one of his fellow coworkers faked an injury. And even though he was on his way out and getting fired, he ended up getting workers' comp. And I guess somehow, I don't know how, he's managed to make the injury seem so very bad that it's a permanent one, that to this day he is still receiving compensation from the company. Whether that's true or not, I'm not sure, but the guy I spoke to is a pretty honest dude, so I see no reason for him to lie. And he did say it was a faked injury too. Maybe the guy smashed his knee on something or something like that intentionally and pretended it was an accident or something, but I don't know the full details, but that one I just thought was more funny than anything. So despite all these problems, apparently the government seems okay with everything. The Liberals seem like everything's going to be going fine. It says Province confidence in prevention system. Despite the rise in welfare fraud in Ottawa, the province isn't hitting the panic button just yet. Quote, we are confident that the measures we have in place to support the integrity of our programs are doing a good job, end quote, said Graham Dempster, a spokesperson for the Ontario Ministry of Community and Social Services. McTiernan said that the city is prepared to devote more staff to fraud investigations to deal with the rising workload. Quote, if we had a workload increase that we felt warranted an increase additional in resources, we would certainly do so, end quote, she said. I personally don't share their confidence because it seems like time and time again we've heard from governments that they're going to do a crackdown on the welfare system, yet nothing happens. So I'm not really going to expect anything to be done about this. And we're Ottawa. We have, a little over 1 million people living in our city? That's actually pretty small for a city. Only have 1 million people living in it. So I get the feeling that's going to be way worse in a place like Toronto, which has, 8 million people living in it or something? I'm not sure the exact numbers. But they have several million people living in the Toronto area, and this relaxation on the welfare program is province-wide, so that will affect Toronto as well. So I actually think around there is where we're going to see a huge spike in welfare fraud. Government says they're going to crack down on everything, but again, when has the government effectively cracked down on welfare fraud? Never. So this is why I'm against the welfare system these days. I don't really see it as much of a benefit for most. Some do. I think there are other ways we can assist them. Not one that's spending our tax money, but something more of a societal welfare system where people will be willing to donate their own money into it that people can use. So essentially it would just be the people that are, it's like donating to a private charity, but it'd be like a charity for welfare. That's the way I think people should do it, because then they can decide whether to donate for that cause. If it was more like that, I would actually donate to that welfare system, because there are people who genuinely need it. But it's not going to be your tax money that is being used for this. We have more of a say as to who benefits from the system, because there are some that will definitely need it and support their family, and others who are just being lazy fucks that don't want to get a goddamn job. So I'd be more in favor of this and abolishing the actual statewide welfare system. Maybe leave small social programs in place, such as the disability program, because I actually understand that one. But then again, maybe that's something we address in this societal charity welfare system that the idea I'm toying with. So yeah, I just wanted to update everybody and let you know where your tax dollars are going. I want to thank you for joining me on the podcast today. I'm Adrian Lloyd. This is just my stupid opinion. I'll see you soon.